In this video, we're going to talk about the much disputed swearing of oaths, oath rings, and other objects you can swear oaths on. Stick around. Welcome to the Northwoods Kindred. I'm your Gothi, Bodvar, and on this channel, we discuss all things Asatru Kindred related. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you want to see how we do it in the Northwoods Kindred. This is so cool. It's one of the greatest things about living up in the Northwoods. We just had to pause our recording because some guy had to go down to the dock and do a polar bear plunge all by himself, no cameras, no people, just for his own personal enjoyment. He went down and did a polar bear plunge, so we respected him and turned off the camera, but that's a really cool thing about living up here because people just enjoy what we have to work with. Now, first thing I want to talk about is oath rings in the history and the lore. There's a lot of examples of oath rings, and I'm going to read this passage to you, and you'll see that oath rings were a prominent part of every altar or temple. There was an altar in the front made with great skill and covered above with iron. On it there was to be a fire which should never die out, which they called the holy fire. On the altar was to lie a large ring of silver, which the temple priest was to wear on his arms at all meetings. Upon it all oaths were to be taken in cases of circumstantial evidences. On the altar was to stand a large bowl of copper, in which was to be put the blood which came from the cattle or men given to Thor. These they called lot, sacrifice blood or sacrifice boli. So you can see that in a temple, the oath ring, a fire, and a boli are pretty much the most important items that they would have in a temple. I think it's fair to assume that that's what the ring was there for, was to swear oaths either to the gods or to settle disputes, because the Gothi was more than just a religious leader. He was almost the judge and jury, and also kind of your legal representation in a district or an area in the Old Norse world. In the earliest time, the Gothis, whose office was called the Godard, Gothiship, were the leaders at sacrifices and spiritual rulers of the people, and their descendants united both the spiritual and temporal power. The position of the Gothi among the Thingmen was of special nature, and was grounded on birth or privilege, such as purchase. The only thing above him was the law, which was in keeping of all the Gothis of the country. Now, if we read the sagas of the Icelanders, the Landnámabók, there are lots of examples of people swearing an oath. Here's a couple of really, really fun ones where you can see it's almost political, where they almost got bullied into it. So here's a really good example from the sagas of the Vikings about maybe not getting bullied into an oath, but definitely being pressured into one. So the king said, "I know that it is customary at such celebrations for men to make vows so as to increase their renown, and since you Vikings are famed in all the lands, it is likely that your vows will surpass all others. Now I shall make the beginning. I vow that I shall have driven King Ethelred of England from his kingdom before the beginning of next winter, or else have slain him and thus obtained his kingdom. Now it is your turn, Sigvaldi, and make your vows not less." Sigvaldi said that, "So it should be, sire. I make the vow that before 3 years have passed, I shall have harried in Norway with such forces as I have, and have driven Earl Håkon out of his land or killed him, or else have fallen myself." The king said, now this is as it should be. So now it's a whole list of all of his men, all in turn having to make more and more greater and greater vows. "Now it is your turn, Thorkel the Tall, and you will have to make your vow a handsome one." Thorkel said, "I have considered it, and this it is, to accompany my brother Sigvaldi and not flee before I see the stern of his ship." "Nobly spoken," the king said, "and you are likely to perform well. And now it is your turn, Bew the Stout, and let your vow be one that is noteworthy." "This vow I make," said Bew, "to support Sigvaldi in this expedition to the best of my power, and to hold out as long as he does." "It is as we thought," said the king. "Manful deeds could be expected of you. It is now your turn, Sigurd, Cape after your brother." "That is quickly done," said Sigurd. "I shall follow my brother and not flee before he flees or is fallen." "That was to be expected of you," said the king. "Now is your turn, Vaughn, and we are eager to hear what your vow will be, because your kinsfolk are men of great mettle." Vaughn said, "My vow is that I shall follow Sigvaldi and Bew, my kinsmen, on this expedition, and hold out as long as Bew does and is alive. And another thing I vow is that if I get to Norway, I shall kill Thorkel Lierla and get into the bed of his daughter Ingeborg without the consent of her kinsfolk." So you can see that there was a lot of pressure that each vow had to be better than the one that came before it. They didn't all meet that mark, but I think that last one from Vaughn pretty much trumped everybody else. Oaths were very important, and to swear an oath in this particular time period in history was basically a verbal contract. Oaths were also important storytelling devices when you talk about the myths. Odin was, and I know I'm gonna get hate mail for this, but Odin was a well-known oath breaker. Of the well-bought matter I made good use. To this the wise now is lacking, for Otherir now up is brought and won for the Lord of all wights. Unharmed again, I hardly come out of the Ettin's hall, if Gunlot had not helped me, the good maiden in whose loving arms I lie. The day after, the Ettins fared into Har's high hall, and to ask for Bolverk, whether the Acer among, or whether by Suttung slain. So the giants showed up in Har's hall and asked if he had seen Bolverk, evil worker, or if Suttung had slain him. And Odin swore on the oath ring. How can you put your trust in his troth? Suttung he swindled and snatched his drink, and Gunloth he beguiled. He swore an oath to Suttung, and then he cheated her and stole the mead. He did it for the good of mankind and the gods, but he still broke an oath. There's lots of examples, especially in the Icelandic sagas, of people who broke oaths becoming outlawed or being outlawed in lesser or greater outlawry based on the fact that they broke an oath. So maybe not a good example of outlawry, but it says here, perjury was punished by fine and inability thereafter to give evidence and loss of writ, which is, I'm guessing you lost a little bit of face and you're not allowed to give evidence again if you broke the oath in perjury. If we examine the sagas of the Icelanders and sagas of the people of that time, you'll see that oaths were very, very important. To break an oath could land you into outlawry. And we also see examples that outlaws were not allowed to worship in the temples. To worship in the temples was not a right, it was a privilege. The temples were considered so holy that anyone damaging them or entering them armed was declared an outlaw, and no one who had committed an offense punishable by law was allowed to enter. So no one who was an outlaw was allowed to enter. Such a person was called Vargivium, wolf in the sanctuary. The ancient name of Ve is sanctuary or sacred place, and it was also regarded as a sacred, the thing place was also regarded as sacred. It was like an extension of the Ve when the thing was in session. So the thing was also a sacred place where weapons had to be laid down. And when you were outlawed from society, you lost the privilege to honor the gods. And to lose the privilege to honor the gods because you failed an oath, you can see how that whole thing would spin your life out of control and downhill. Hey, do me a favor, hit that like button if you already knew that. So we know from the Eddas and the sagas that oaths were contracts. They were legal binding agreements and deals. Oftentimes, oaths were sworn in the presence of witnesses so that they had witnesses to call on if you broke the oath, and they would have, essentially that's your contract. If you ask me, it's a better contract system than what we have now because there is no fine print. If it wasn't stated, then you did an oath to it. On a contract, you sign it, you signed it, no matter the legalese involved or the fine print, you could always get caught up in a trap. So in the case of circumstantial evidence, you could call upon witnesses that could oath to defend you. So if there were witnesses, including at least 2 free men who were of age to testify under oath for or against, then the one who had the most witnesses won his case. A ring weighing 2 arar, I don't know what that unit of measure is, I'm guessing like pounds, or more, was to lie in every head temple on the altar, and every Gothi was to wear it on his arm at all things. Every man who had to perform legal duties there had to first take an oath on this ring and name 2 or more witnesses and say, I call to witness that I took the oath on the ring, a lawful oath, so help me Frey, Njord, and the almighty As, aka Odin. We also know that Gothis that represented the different districts when they would come together at Althing were required to keep an oath ring with them, probably for lesser oaths. The oath was taken at the thing or temple by placing the hand on a ring which had been consecrated by having been dipped in the blood of the sacrificed ox. This ring, which was of silver, lay on the altar at each head temple and was therefore called the altar ring, or Stala ring. The Gothi was required to have it on his arm at everything so that it was always at hand if needed. The man who took the oath held his hand upon the ring and in the presence of witnesses called upon the Aesir and begged their help. Maybe there was some sort of oath of brotherhood or kinship. Maybe there was a marriage happening at all things, because a marriage was essentially an oath between two people or between two families, so it was a contract. It wasn't necessarily because Gudrun loved Thorson. Like, that's not why they got married. They got married because her family and his family had an alignment or some sort of an agreement. They would pay a fee back and forth. It was a whole contracted thing going on that created that marriage, and it would have to be oaths to enforce it. Marriage was not a religious contract or ceremony. It was simply regarded as a civil contract owning to the relations which man and wife held towards each other in regards to property. It was the means of joining families together, which was called tengasenmen, and therefore the relation was called tengadir. Consequently, marriage itself was a bargain, and on that account was called brudkop, or bride buying. And I probably butchered those words, but you get the point. Some of that actually remains true in the modern times in the symbol of, you guessed it, our wedding ring. A wedding ring is a miniature oath ring. We generally swear one oath on it, but there would be cause, especially for people like us, for Asatrus and Asatru and heathens, to just, hey honey, I'm going out with the boys. And she'll be like, are you really going with the boys, or are you going to cheat on me? I swear on this ring that I'm going with, like, that's a legit oath. That's a legit way to swear a contract or swear an oath, is on your oath ring. Now, what people don't really understand is when you go to court and you put your hand on the Bible and you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God, that was derived from the oath rings at the all things in the Viking Age, or the later periods of the Viking Age after the conversion to Christianity. What happened was people didn't trust the testimony if you didn't swear it on a ring. So they had to come up with a system in the new Christian world that would have the same symbolism as swearing on a ring did to the old ones, because this was a transitional period, remember. If you swore on a ring, then you were telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you the gods, essentially. So if you didn't swear on a ring, if you just went to court and said, I'm telling the truth, it held no weight. That's where swearing on the Bible came in, where they had to produce something that would take the place of the oath ring. And it's not unique to the era. People can get behind that because the oath ring wasn't the only way to swear an oath. So leave me a comment. Can you think of any other ways to swear an oath besides on a ring or a Bible? Now, a lot of kindreds have a lot of different examples of oath rings. Kindreds use all kinds of different things for oath rings. We have a lot of examples here. Now, I have a big, chunky, solid brass oath ring that I machined in my shop out of a solid piece of brass. That's the oath ring for our kindred. Now, my wife has her own oath ring, one that I also made out of cold rolled steel and etched runes in with an electronic etcher. So it's a little bit more modern, but it still has the same purpose. It's an oath ring for swearing of oaths. I have a smaller, sort of a bangle bracelet stainless steel oath ring that goes in my travel kit for if I have to travel to do go these services like weddings or funerals for veterans, things of that nature. Now, if you look back to this video here, when we go to Goodwill and we build our ritual kit, we found a nice little brass oath ring at a thrift store for almost nothing. And while it doesn't have a lot of value, the more oaths you swear on it, the more value it really does hold for the individual. These are a popular type of oath ring, these modern ones, made popular, I'm pretty sure, by the program The Vikings, because they do some little oathing ceremony and they pass these rings out. I'm not sure how historic that is. I think probably it was, at that point, less of an oath ring and more of a gift for swearing your fealty to the king or the jarl or the carl or whoever. But we wear them today, and in my kindred, we have a kind of a nice little tradition. After a member has been around for a while and has proven that they're true to us, or true to the gods and true to the way that we do things and not essentially a troublemaker, then eventually they'll be voted into the kindred. As they get voted into the kindred, at their 1-year anniversary, we give them one of these oath rings. It is more to commemorate their oath to the gods, not to ensure any fealty or loyalty to the kindred. That's never in question, and that's never anything that we require of anybody to swear. All they do when they swear into our kindred is they swear to defend the gods and goddesses of Asatru and their ancestors and the folk to the best of their abilities. But these are not the only things that oaths were sworn on. There are examples throughout the sagas and Eddas of swearing oaths on all kinds of different objects. And so let's tear that apart a little bit. Oaths were sometimes sworn on objects. Volund says to Nidhud, his father-in-law, "First thou shalt to me swear all oaths at the ship's side, at the shield's edge, at the horse's foot, at the sword's edge, that thou killest not the wife of Volund, nor puttest to death my bride." So he's making his father-in-law swear on all these useful things like the side of his ship, the edge of his shield, the blade of his sword, and the hoof of his horse, that he did not kill his daughter, Volund's wife. Another example is Gudrun and Attili. "Go it thus with thee, Attili, as thou to Gunnar often didst swear oaths and name them of yore." So now they're not swearing oaths on objects, but on other things. The south slanting sun, the rock of Sigtýr, the horse of bedrest, and the ring of Uller. So those are various other things that they could swear oaths on. They didn't actually have to touch it. They just had to swear on it. Like, hey, I swear on my mother's grave. Directly derivative from that sort of engagement. If I was to swear an oath on the tip of a sword, now, I think that some people mistakenly mean I swear an oath, and if I don't break that oath, then that sword bites me. But I don't think that's the case. I think you swear the oath on a sword, and even if I'm swearing on your sword or my sword, I swear the oath on a sword, meaning if I don't hold my oath, then my own sword will fail me. And who wants to ask the gods to make their sword fail them? Because oaths were sworn on the tips of swords, on knives or sacks, on axes, and even on the edge of a shield. They would swear an oath on the edge of a shield. I don't understand how you could swear an oath on the edge of a shield and ask the gods that if I lie to you, go ahead and just take this shield away from me or make it fail me in combat. There's a consequence to that. So I think that held a lot of weight. But in the temples, since there were no weapons allowed in the temples, if you didn't know that, but Ingemund went into the temple, and before he was aware of it, Raffen ran in with a sword. Ingemund turned towards him and said, "It is not the custom to bring weapons into the temple, and thou wilt turn the wrath of the gods against thee. Such a thing is impossible unless it is atoned for." There were no weapons allowed in the temples at all. You would be declared an outlaw and not be allowed back into the temples. You're supposed to leave your weapons outside. So there are no swords and knives and axes and probably not even any shields inside the temples. I think it's probably entirely accurate that you could swear an oath on your hammer, that you're essentially swearing an oath before Thor, not to Thor. I can swear an oath to you on my hammer, and that if I don't enforce it, then I am forfeiting the protection that I get from my Mjolnir or from the god Thor, who is the protector of man, so probably not one you want to tick off. And lastly, there's even examples of swearing oaths on a stone. Gudrun asked Attili why he was no longer married, and he told her the cause of his jealousy and that she was unfaithful to him. And she answers, "I will take the oaths before thee about all this upon the white holy stone, that I act not with Thodrek as husband and wife might do." In other words, she didn't sleep with Homie. And it says in the Cliff Notes, in the second song of Helgi, stanza 31, an oath upon a stone is mentioned. These holy stones may have been the Horg. On a rock. They put their hands on the rock and they swear an oath. Now, I'm not sure the real value in that, because it's not like that rock's going to hurt you or like it's going to lose its value to you, but there might be something to swearing an oath to the earth itself, that may I fulfill my oath, or may I no longer be welcome in this realm. May I be an outlaw forever because I swore an oath on the earth to the earth. And another example of that would be the ritual of blood brotherhood, where they raise the turf. They'll cut a bridge and raise the turf in order to swear an oath directly into the soil and then cover it with turf. I think it right that we should bind our friendship still closer than before, and we four swear one another foster brother. So in the book they say foster brother, meaning blood brother. To this they consented and went on to the point or tongue of the land, and there cut from the ground a loop of turf, both ends being attached to the ground, and under this they placed a spear inlaid with ornaments so long that a man could reach with his hand to the spear nail, i.e. the nail that holds the spear to the handle. Under this were to go the four, Thorgrim, Gisli, Thorkel, and Weistin. They then drew blood from themselves and let it run together into the mold, which is the dirt beneath, which had been cut under the loop of turf and mixed together in the earth and the blood. Thereupon they all fell to their knees and swore an oath to each other, should avenge the other like a brother, and called all the gods as witnesses as they shook hands. So it's very common after swearing an oath, not only blood brother, but any kind of an oath or an agreement, was to shake hands afterwards to bind that oath. I've personally swore blood oaths to 4 brothers in my almost 30 years career in Asatru. And one is Håkon Veneta, the chieftain of the Galahorn Kindred. 2 is Thorin Alsfarin, the Vidki of the Galahorn Kindred. 3 is James Huka Coulter, very celebrated author in the Germanic side of Asatru as a whole. And my 4th blood brother is to Aldolf Brew, a fellow kinsman in Galahorn, as well as an ungovernable heathen and general troublemaker just like me. Now, in keeping with modern rules as well as some old Icelandic rules from the Thing, what we do at our Kindred gatherings is we have a meeting, an important meeting of just the voting members. Generally, there's no real business to discuss, but sometimes there is, such as voting in new members, that sort of thing. We conduct the meeting in accordance with Robert's Rules of Orders, and we swear on the oath ring to have peace during the meeting. Now, that's an easy oath to fill. We just don't start fights. We also have a lawkeeper who is not me and not the Gidya, but someone separate who has no other role in the Kindred but to be a good kinsman and supervise our meetings. That way, I'm not the high seat, she's not the high seat, our Vidki or our Grimbearer, none of those are the high seat. We have one individual who is a member in good standing, who is the law speaker, and they control the meeting. So if we start getting a little heated, he can pick up the ring and end the meeting or put it on a pause so we all have time to cool down. It has been needed before. And I'll go one further and I'll tell you how we use that oath ring during our meetings. When we will all swear an oath, generally a really simple oath to just keep the peace and be brotherly kinsmen during the duration of this meeting. After the meeting, we can go punch each other. You know, after the meeting's over, if we really got some beef, we can take it out back. But usually we can work it out in the meeting. But we swear that to the meeting, and then the ring sits in the center of the table as we discuss. And we discuss freely back and forth around the table. But if things get heated, if someone picks up that oath ring, then all conversation stops. They are the only one talking. Now, it's not really fair to bogart the ring. You say what you have to say, what you couldn't get out in the heat of the conversation, and then you lay the ring back down. If somebody else needs to take it up to say their piece, that's fine. When that's all done, the ring is back on the table and conversation ensues again amongst all the people. We found that to be a really, really clean and easy way to conduct our meetings, especially when there's things on the horizon that require some difficult decisions. I hope you found some value in that. Share this video with your kinsmen or someone you think might be able to get some use out of it. And may all of your oaths come true and you gain favor in the eyes of the gods. Hail the folk.